I thought Thailand was conservative, until Pride Month changed everything. Chapter 1. The assumption I brought from home. Before I came to Thailand, I believed I already understood the country. Not completely, of course. No traveler ever truly understands a place before arriving. But I thought I knew enough. Thailand, in my mind, was a country of golden temples, tropical islands, and smiling people. A place where tradition was woven into daily life. A place where ancient customs still mattered. A place where respect and politeness shaped almost every interaction. I had seen countless photographs, endless travel videos, articles written by other travelers, and somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I had built an entire version of Thailand inside my imagination. The strange thing about assumptions is that they rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, they settle comfortably, and after a while, we stop recognizing them as assumptions at all. They begin to feel like facts. My name is Oliver Hartley. I was 36 years old when this story took place. At the time, I lived in a small town in southern England. The kind of town where church bells still echoed through the streets every Sunday morning. The kind of town where neighbors greeted one another by name. The kind of town where very little seemed to change. Most people consider that comforting, and often it was. But after years of living the same routines, I had begun feeling restless. Not unhappy, just tired. The sort of tiredness that doesn't come from lack of sleep. The sort that comes from repetition. Every morning looked similar. Every week felt predictable. My work certainly didn't help. I worked as a travel writer. At least, that was the title printed beneath my name. In reality, most days involve staring at a laptop for hours, answering emails, editing drafts, and chasing deadlines. Ironically, a career built around travel often left very little time for actual traveling. By the beginning of June, I knew I needed a break. Not a holiday filled with schedules and sightseeing. A genuine break. A chance to slow down, to breathe, to observe, to remember why I had fallen in love with travel in the first place. And so, almost on impulse, I booked a flight to Thailand. I wasn't searching for adventure. I wasn't searching for answers. I simply wanted distance from my usual life. Distance has a way of revealing things. Sometimes it reveals truths about the world. Sometimes it reveals truths about ourselves. I suspected I needed both. The flight departed London on a gray morning. Rain tapped softly against the airport windows. Passengers moved through the terminal carrying coffees, backpacks, and sleepy expressions. Outside, clouds covered the sky. Everything felt muted. I found my seat beside the window and watched the runway glisten beneath the drizzle. Soon the engines roared. The aircraft accelerated, and within moments, England disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. Hours passed. The world unfolded beneath us. Cities became patterns of light. Mountains appeared and vanished. Oceans stretched endlessly toward distant horizons. The journey felt both impossibly long and strangely peaceful. Travel has a way of creating that feeling. You exist between places, between versions of yourself, neither fully here nor fully there, just moving, suspended, waiting for whatever comes next. Somewhere during the flight, I noticed a rainbow-colored advertisement displayed on one of the entertainment screens. It mentioned Pride Month. I barely paid attention. Back home, June always brought rainbow colors. Storefronts, public buildings, advertisements, social media campaign. They became part of the landscape. Familiar, expected. I assumed Thailand would be focused on entirely different things. Tourism, temples, summer travel, food festivals. Pride Month hardly crossed my mind. If someone had told me that it would become one of the defining memories of my trip, I would have laughed. But travel rarely asks for our expectations. It simply replaces them. The plane landed in Bangkok just before sunset. As we descended through scattered clouds, the city stretched endlessly beneath us. Rivers of traffic glowed orange in the fading light. Glass towers reflected the last colors of the day. Clusters of buildings spread toward the horizon in every direction. The city seemed enormous, alive, vibrant. When the aircraft doors opened, warm air entered the cabin. Immediately, I noticed the difference. The temperature, The humidity, the scent, even the air itself felt unfamiliar. It carried traces of rain, flowers, food, and distant smoke. The atmosphere seemed rich somehow, layered, as though countless stories existed within every breath. Inside the airport, everything moved smoothly. Families reunited. Travelers collected luggage. Airport staff guided visitors with quiet efficiency. Within an hour, I was sitting in the back of a taxi heading toward the city. Bangkok unfolded around me. Motorcycles flowed between cars. Street vendors prepared evening meals beneath colorful awnings. Office workers hurried toward train stations. Bright signs illuminated entire streets. The city felt energetic without feeling overwhelming. That surprised me. I had heard stories about Bangkok's chaos, the traffic, the crowds, the noise. Yet what I felt wasn't chaos. It was life. There is a difference. The taxi eventually reached my hotel near the Chao Phraya River. The building was modest, comfortable, exactly what I wanted. My room overlooked the water. As soon as I entered, I walked directly to the window. The view stopped me immediately. The river moved slowly through the city. Temple lights glowed across the water. Boats drifted through the darkness. The skyline shimmered beneath the evening sky. Everything felt peaceful, far more peaceful than I had expected from a city of this size. For several minutes, I simply stood there, watching, listening, breathing. No emails, no deadlines, no responsibilities demanding my attention. Just the river, just the city, just the moment. Eventually, hunger persuaded me to leave the hotel and explore. The streets below had transformed since sunset. Food stalls lined the sidewalks. Plastic tables filled with customers. Families gathered around meals. Friends shared conversations beneath hanging lights. The atmosphere felt welcoming, relaxed. The scent of grilled seafood drifted through the warm evening air. Fresh herbs, charcoal smoke, coconut milk. Every few steps brought a new aroma, a new sound, a new detail. I purchased a bowl of noodle soup from a small street stall. The vendor smiled warmly and pointed toward an empty chair. I sat down and watched the world pass by. People came and went. Motorcycles buzzed through narrow streets. Children laughed. Someone played music nearby. The city seemed to exist in constant motion, yet nothing felt rushed. The pace was different from home, softer, more patient. As I finished eating, something caught my eye across the street. A small cafe. Warm lights glowed through its windows. Several customers sat inside reading books. Plants filled the front window. And hanging beside the entrance was a small rainbow flag. I noticed it briefly, then returned my attention to the street. At the time, it seemed completely insignificant. Just another detail among thousands of details. A decoration, nothing more. But looking back now, I smile when I remember that moment, because that tiny rainbow flag was the first clue, the first thread in a much larger story, a story I could not yet see, a story that would slowly challenge many of the assumptions I had carried from home. After dinner, I continued walking along the river. The night deepened. Temple lights reflected on the water. Boats drifted silently through the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the soft hum of a train crossing the city. The sound seemed almost comforting, like a reminder that life continued everywhere around me. For the first time in months, I felt completely present, not thinking about next week, not worrying about unfinished work, simply existing. The river flowed steadily beside me. The city breathed. And somehow, without fully understanding why, I felt that something important was beginning. Not dramatically, not obviously, just quietly. The way many important things begin. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I opened my notebook. The first page remained blank. I stared at it for several moments. Then I wrote a single sentence. Thailand already feels different from what I expected. I wasn't entirely sure what I meant. Nothing extraordinary had happened. No great revelations. No life-changing experiences. Only a few hours in a new city. Yet the feeling remained. Something about the picture I carried in my mind no longer felt complete, as though Thailand contained layers I had never considered. Layers hidden beneath the surface. Layers waiting to be discovered. I closed the notebook, Outside, the river reflected moonlight. The city slowly settled into sleep. And somewhere beyond the lights of Bangkok, beyond the rooftops and train tracks and winding streets, a story was already waiting for me. A story that would begin with rainbow flags. A story that would lead to conversations I never expected. And a story that would quietly change the way I looked at Thailand forever. Chapter 2. The rainbow flags I didn't expect. The next morning, I woke just before sunrise. For a few moments, I forgot where I was. The room was quiet. The air conditioner hummed softly in the background. A faint orange glow slipped through the curtains. Then I remembered. Bangkok, Thailand, the city on the other side of the world. I climbed out of bed and walked toward the window. Outside, the Chao Phraya River was already awake. Long-tail boats moved slowly across the water. A ferry carried early commuters from one side of the river to the other. The sky above Bangkok was painted in shades of gold and pale blue. Everything felt calm, unhurried. The city seemed to be stretching awake one gentle movement at a time. Back home, mornings often felt like a race. Coffee, emails, meetings, schedules, deadlines. Here, however, the day seemed to begin differently, more softly, more patiently. I stood there for several minutes watching the sunlight spread across the river. Then I decided to explore, not with a plan, not with a map, just curiosity. Some of my favorite travel experiences had begun exactly that way. A wrong turn, a random conversation, an unexpected discovery. After a quick breakfast, I stepped outside into the warm June morning. The city was already alive. Street vendors arranged fresh fruit beneath colorful umbrellas. Office workers walked briskly toward train stations. Students in neat uniforms laughed together as they crossed busy intersections. Motorbike taxis waited beneath trees. Bangkok moved with energy, but somehow it never felt rushed. That was becoming one of my first impressions of Thailand. The city was busy, very busy, yet there remained a sense of ease beneath the movement, as though people had learned how to flow around one another rather than fight for space. I followed whichever streets looked interesting. Narrow lanes became wider roads. Small neighborhoods opened into shopping districts. Every corner seemed to reveal something new. A flower market bursting with color. A hidden temple tucked between office buildings. A tiny bakery releasing the smell of fresh bread into the street. The city felt full of surprises. Around mid-morning, I reached a BTS SkyTrain station. The elevated tracks stretched above the streets like silver pathways. I had seen photographs before, but standing beneath them felt different. The trains moved smoothly overhead, almost silently, modern and elegant against the backdrop of an ancient city. As I climbed the station stairs, something caught my attention. A rainbow banner. It hung beside an advertisement. Bright, colorful, simple. I paused for only a moment, then continued walking. After all, it was June. Rainbow colors were hardly unusual. Yet, as I boarded the train and found a seat by the window, I noticed another banner at the next station. And another after that. Then another. Some were large, others small. Some decorated storefronts, others hung from lampposts. The further I traveled, the more frequently they appeared. At first, I thought perhaps I was imagining it. Once you notice something, you tend to see it everywhere. But by the time I arrived at Siam Station, there was no doubt. Rainbow colors were woven throughout the city. I stepped onto the crowded platform. The station buzzed with activity. Students, tourists, office workers, families, thousands of people moving through the heart of Bangkok. As I crossed one of the elevated walkways connecting the shopping centers, I noticed a large pride display below. Bright colors curved through the space like a rainbow bridge. People stopped to take photographs. Children pointed excitedly. Teenagers posed for selfies. Parents smiled patiently while holding shopping bags. What surprised me most wasn't the display itself. It was the atmosphere surrounding it. No one seemed particularly focused on it. No one appeared uncomfortable. No one seemed interested in arguing. The display simply existed as part of the city. Natural, ordinary, comfortable. I found an empty bench overlooking the plaza and sat down. The morning sun reflected from the surrounding buildings. A warm breeze drifted through the open space. For a while, I simply watched. An elderly couple sat nearby sharing iced coffee. A group of university students laughed while reviewing photographs on a phone. A family posed beside the colorful installation. Everything felt peaceful, and slowly, a question began forming in my mind. Why had this surprised me? The answer wasn't entirely comfortable, because it forced me to examine assumptions I hadn't realized I was carrying. Somewhere along the way, I had unconsciously decided that a country could be either traditional or accepting, either old-fashioned or modern, either one thing or the other. Thailand was quietly challenging that idea, not through speeches, not through headlines, but through everyday life, through ordinary people going about their day. The realization stayed with me as I continued exploring. By midday, the heat had intensified. The tropical sun reflected from glass towers. Even the breeze felt warm. I wandered through shopping districts and side streets alike. Everywhere, the same pattern appeared. Rainbow stickers on cafe windows, colorful displays in public spaces, small decorations in shops. Nothing overwhelming, nothing performative, just present, part of the city's landscape. At one point, I stopped beneath the shade of a large tree and watched a group of students decorating a small community display. They worked together, laughing and chatting. One tied ribbons, another arranged flowers, a third adjusted a banner. The atmosphere reminded me less of a political event and more of a neighborhood celebration. There was joy in it, a sense of participation, a sense of community. One of the students noticed me watching. She smiled and waved. I waved back, then continued walking. The city seemed determined to challenge every simple description I had ever heard about it. Traditional, yes. Modern, also yes. Busy, certainly. Peaceful, somehow, yes, again. Bangkok appeared comfortable holding contradictions. Perhaps that was one of its strengths. The afternoon grew hotter. My shirt clung slightly to my back. The sun sat high above the city. And that was when I spotted the cafe. It stood on a quieter side street just beyond the main shopping area. Small, inviting, almost hidden. Plants framed the doorway. Books filled shelves visible through the front window. Soft music drifted from inside. And attached to the glass door was a small rainbow sticker. I stopped. The place looked cool, comfortable, exactly what I needed after several hours of walking. Without thinking too much about it, I pushed open the door. A tiny bell chimed above my head. Cool air welcomed me immediately. The scent of coffee filled the room. Only a few customers occupied the tables. Some read books. Others worked quietly on laptops. The atmosphere felt calm, like a small refuge hidden inside the city. I ordered an iced latte and found a seat near the window. Outside, Bangkok continued moving beneath the bright June sky. Inside, time seemed slower, gentler. I opened my notebook and wrote a single sentence. Thailand is already different from what I expected. Then I looked up. Above the counter hung another small rainbow flag. The woman behind the counter noticed me looking at it. She smiled, and somehow, without either of us realizing it yet, that simple smile was about to begin one of the most memorable conversations of my entire journey. Chapter 3. A conversation inside a tiny coffee shop. The cafe felt like a different world from the streets outside. Bangkok continued moving beyond the windows. Trains glided across elevated tracks. Motorcycles flowed through traffic. Tourists wandered beneath the midday sun. But inside the little cafe, everything seemed slower. The ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. Soft acoustic music drifted from hidden speakers. Plants filled nearly every corner of the room. Some sat on shelves. Others hung from the ceiling. A few rested beside stacks of books that looked as though they had been collected over many years. The entire place felt lived in, loved, the sort of place where people stayed longer than they intended. I sat near the window and took a sip of my iced latte. It was strong, cold, perfect. After several hours of walking through Bangkok's heat, for a while, I simply watched the room. A university student sat reading near the back. An elderly man slowly worked his way through a newspaper. A young couple shared a slice of cake while speaking quietly to one another. Nobody seemed rushed. Nobody appeared eager to leave. The cafe felt less like a business and more like a living room that happened to serve coffee. Behind the counter, the owner moved calmly between customers. She greeted people by name, remembered their usual orders, asked about their families. There was an ease to the way she interacted with everyone, a warmth that felt genuine, not rehearsed, not performed, simply natural. After a few minutes, she approached my table carrying a small glass of water. "For the heat," she said. I smiled. "Thank you." She placed the glass beside my coffee. "You have been walking." I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." She smiled. "Bangkok is a very good city for walking. Even in this weather?" She laughed. "Especially in this weather." The smile reached her eyes. "My name is Pim, Oliver." "Nice to meet you, Oliver." "Nice to meet you too." For a moment, she looked toward the notebook on my table. "You are writing?" "Trying to." "Travel writer?" I looked surprised. She pointed toward my notebook, then toward the camera resting beside it, then smiled. "Only a guess." I laughed. "A very accurate guess." She nodded proudly, then glanced toward the rainbow flag hanging above the counter, the same one I had noticed earlier, the same one that had quietly followed me through Bangkok all morning. "You have questions," she said. Again, it wasn't really a question, more an observation. I smiled. "Do I look that curious?" "Very." We both laughed. Something about the conversation felt easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that happens naturally while traveling. Two strangers speaking honestly because neither expects anything from the other. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to ask. "I've noticed pride flags everywhere." Pim nodded. "Yes, I wasn't expecting that." Again, she nodded, not offended, not surprised, as though she had heard similar comments before. "What were you expecting?" she asked. The question lingered in the air. Simple, direct, difficult. I looked down at my coffee, searching for the right words. I suppose I thought Thailand would be more conservative. Pim smiled gently, not because she agreed, not because she disagreed, because she understood. Many visitors think that. "Really?" "Oh yes." She pulled out the empty chair across from me and sat down. The afternoon was quiet. Business was slow. The conversation seemed welcome. "Thailand is traditional," she said. I nodded. That much felt obvious. The temples alone proved it. The respect shown toward elders, the customs, the rituals, the deep connection to history. Everywhere I looked, tradition seemed present. But tradition and acceptance are not always opposites, Pim continued. I found myself thinking about that sentence. Back home, people often spoke as though they were traditional or modern, old-fashioned or progressive, one side or the other. Yet Pim spoke as though both could comfortably exist together. The idea fascinated me. "Why do you think so many foreigners are surprised?" I asked. Pim thought for a moment, then smiled. "Because many people arrive with stories." "What kind of stories?" "The simple kind." I laughed. "Those are usually the easiest stories to believe." "Exactly." Outside, clouds drifted slowly across the afternoon sky. Sunlight moved across the cafe floor. The city seemed softer now, less hurried. Pim folded her hands together on the table. "People visit Thailand for 1 week, sometimes 2. They see beaches. They see temples. They eat good food. They take photographs." I smiled. "That sounds familiar." Then they go home and think they understand Thailand. We both laughed. The truth of it felt impossible to deny. Travelers often mistake observation for understanding. A few days in, a country can reveal many things, but it rarely reveals everything. The real heart of a place usually exists beneath the surface, inside families, inside communities, inside ordinary daily life. Pim looked toward the front window. For a moment, her expression softened. My younger brother taught me that. Something in her voice made me pay closer attention. Not sadness, not regret, just affection. The warmth people carry when speaking about someone they love. "He lives in Chiang Mai now." "What's he do?" "He owns a bakery." "A bakery?" She nodded proudly. "The best croissants in northern Thailand." I laughed. That sounds like a bold claim. It is, and completely true. We both smiled. For a moment, she seemed to be remembering something. Then she continued. When he was younger, he worried all the time. About what? What people thought. The cafe remained quiet around us. The fan hummed softly overhead. Outside, a train crossed the city. Its silver body flashed briefly between buildings, then disappeared. He spent years trying to become someone else. I nodded slowly. The story felt familiar, not because of the details, because of the emotion. Many people spend years carrying expectations that don't belong to them, trying to fit shapes they were never meant to fit, trying to become versions of themselves that feel safer, easier, more acceptable. And then, I asked. Pim smiled. And then he became tired. Tired of pretending. The simplicity of the answer made me smile. Sometimes life's biggest changes begin that way, not with courage, not with confidence, just exhaustion. The realization that continuing is harder than changing. My brother finally told our parents. I waited. He was terrified. I can imagine. He prepared speeches. He practiced conversations. He worried for months. What happened? Pim laughed softly. My mother asked if he was hungry. I blinked. That's all? That was her first question. We both laughed. The image felt wonderfully human. A son preparing for a life-changing conversation. A mother worrying about whether he had eaten enough. Some things seem universal across every culture. And your father? He asked if he wanted tea. Again, we laughed. The ordinary nature of the story somehow made it more powerful, not less. Eventually, the laughter faded. Pim's smile remained. My parents had questions. Of course, they needed time. They didn't understand everything immediately. She paused. But there was always love. The sentence settled quietly between us. Outside, Bangkok continued moving beneath the afternoon sun. Inside the cafe, everything seemed still. There was always love. Simple words. Yet perhaps the most important words in any family story. My mother says something interesting. What? Pim smiled. She always says, "You are still my child." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sentence lingered. Simple, ordinary, powerful. I thought about all the conversations taking place around the world. All the families trying to understand one another. All the people hoping to be accepted. And somehow, those 5 words seem to contain everything important. You are still my child. No speeches, no grand declarations, just love. Expressed simply, expressed clearly. Pim stood and walked back toward the counter. A moment later, she returned, carrying a small plate, a slice of coconut cake. I didn't order that. I know. Then why am I receiving cake? She smiled. Because good conversations deserve cake. I laughed. It seemed impossible to argue with that logic. The cake was excellent. Light, sweet, comforting. For several minutes, we sat quietly, watching the city, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Then I asked the question that had been lingering in my thoughts all day. What does Pride Month mean to you? Pim looked toward the rainbow flag hanging above the counter. The afternoon sunlight illuminated its colors. For several seconds, she considered her answer. Then she smiled. A chance for people to be seen. The words landed gently, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly, a chance for people to be seen. I thought about the families I had passed that morning, the students, the office workers, the tourists, the people decorating this place. Perhaps everyone wanted the same thing, not attention, not approval, simply to be seen, to exist without hiding, to belong without explanation. Outside, the afternoon was slowly becoming evening. The light softened. The city seemed to exhale. Pim eventually stood. I should get back to work. Thank you for the conversation. She smiled warmly. You're welcome. Then she paused. There is a Pride event this weekend. I've heard. You should go. Why? Her smile widened. Because Thailand is easier to understand when you listen. I watched her return to the counter. The phrase stayed with me. Thailand is easier to understand when you listen. At the time, I thought she was simply recommending an event. I didn't realize she was offering something much more valuable, a different way of seeing, a different way of understanding. And as I finished the last bite of coconut cake and looked out toward the city beyond the cafe window, I had a feeling that Bangkok still had many lessons left to teach me. Chapter 4. Walking through Bangkok Pride. The morning of Bangkok Pride arrived bright and clear. Sunlight spilled across the river outside my hotel window. The Chao Phraya shimmered beneath a pale blue sky. Boats moved steadily through the water, leaving gentle ripples behind them. The city seemed unusually cheerful. Not because it was louder, not because it was busier. There was simply a feeling in the air, a quiet sense of anticipation, as though thousands of people were looking forward to the same moment. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee and watched Bangkok wake. Temple roofs glowed gold beneath the morning sun. The first ferries crossed the river. Street vendors arranged fruit beneath colorful umbrellas. Everything felt peaceful, yet underneath that peace was excitement, the kind that arrives before a celebration. I found myself thinking about Pim, about her brother, about the stories I had heard during the previous few days. Most of all, I thought about her words. A chance for people to be seen. The phrase had remained with me, perhaps because it felt so simple, and yet so universal. Every person, in some way, wants to be seen, not necessarily admired, not necessarily celebrated, simply recognized, accepted, understood. Around mid-morning, I left the hotel and headed toward the BTS station. The city was already alive. Groups of friends walked together carrying umbrellas to block the sun. Families crossed busy intersections. Students gathered near station entrances. The atmosphere felt lighter than usual, almost festive. As I boarded the train, I immediately noticed more color than I had seen on previous days. Small rainbow pins attached to bags, bright shirts, colorful bracelets, nothing extravagant, nothing designed to attract attention, just little signs that today meant something special. The train glided smoothly above the city. Outside the windows, Bangkok unfolded beneath the tracks. Office buildings, temples, markets, apartment towers. The city seemed endless. At each station, more passengers joined. Groups of friends, couples, families with children, elderly people traveling together. I found that particularly surprising. Back home, many people spoke about Pride events as though they belonged to a specific group, a specific generation, a specific community. Yet here, the crowd felt remarkably diverse. The event seemed to belong to everyone. By the time I arrived near the celebration area, the streets were already busy. Music drifted through the warm air. Volunteers guided visitors toward gathering points. Colorful decorations lined walkways and public spaces. Food vendors prepared snacks beneath temporary tents. The atmosphere reminded me of a cultural festival more than anything else. For several minutes, I simply stood still, watching, listening, taking everything in. Travel writers often feel pressure to describe moments immediately, to analyze them, to explain them, but some experiences need time. Some experiences ask only to be observed, and so I observed. The first thing I noticed was the laughter, not loud laughter, not attention-seeking laughter, just ordinary happiness. Friends laughing together, children laughing, parents smiling, the kind of laughter that appears when people feel comfortable, safe, included. I began walking slowly through the crowd. Music played somewhere nearby. A group of university students danced together beneath colorful decorations. Nearby, a grandmother held her granddaughter's hand while they looked at a display of artwork. A young father carried his son on his shoulders. The little boy pointed excitedly at everything he saw. The father laughed. The boy laughed. And for a moment, the entire scene felt wonderfully ordinary. That was the surprise. Not the rainbow flags. Not the celebration. The ordinariness of it. The humanity. The simple fact that people were spending time together, sharing a day, creating memories. I continued walking. Everywhere I looked, I saw small moments. A group of friends taking photographs, street musicians performing beneath trees, artists selling handmade crafts, food vendors serving customers, children chasing bubbles through the crowd. The event felt less like a parade and more like a community gathering, a giant neighborhood celebration, a city deciding to spend the day together. The further I walked, the more relaxed I felt. Back home, public conversations often carry tension. People seem constantly prepared for disagreement, prepared for conflict, prepared to defend themselves. Yet here, I sensed something different. Not perfect agreement. No society has that. But a willingness to share space, a willingness to coexist, a willingness to allow people to participate. The feeling reminded me of something I had heard shortly after arriving in Thailand, a word that appeared in travel books and conversations alike, sanuk. Many guidebooks translate it simply as fun, but over the previous week, I had begun to suspect the word meant something deeper. Sanuk was not merely enjoyment. It was shared enjoyment, the belief that life should contain moments of happiness, moments of connection, moments of participation. Looking around Bangkok Pride, I felt that spirit everywhere. People weren't simply watching. They were participating, creating the atmosphere together, contributing to it, making it possible. Around midday, the heat became intense. I purchased a cold coconut drink from a vendor and found a shaded place beneath a large tree. Nearby, a family occupied a picnic table. 3 generations sat together: grandparents, parents, children. The youngest child could not have been older than 6. She wore a bright, rainbow-colored hat and seemed determined to ask every question imaginable. The grandparents listened patiently. The parents laughed. The child continued asking questions. The scene made me smile. For a while, I simply watched the family. Nothing extraordinary happened. No dramatic conversation. No emotional speech. Just people enjoying each other's company. Yet, somehow, that small moment stayed with me. Perhaps because it reflected something I had been noticing throughout Thailand. The importance of family. The importance of connection. The importance of simply being together. Travel often encourages us to search for spectacular experiences, the famous view, the unforgettable attraction, the perfect photograph. Yet many of the most meaningful memories come from ordinary moments. A family sharing lunch, a conversation over coffee, a smile exchanged between strangers. Those are the moments that reveal a place's true character. As afternoon slowly drifted toward evening, the celebration continued. Music echoed through the streets. People danced. Children played. Artists painted. Friends laughed. The city felt alive. Not chaotic. Alive. There is a difference. Eventually, the sun began sinking toward the horizon. Golden light spilled across Bangkok. Glass buildings reflected shades of orange and pink. The sky seemed larger somehow. Softer. The celebration gradually slowed. Families began heading home. Volunteers started collecting equipment. Food vendors prepared for the evening crowd. The energy shifted, not ending, simply changing. I found a place overlooking the city and sat down. For several minutes, I watched the sunset. The skyline glowed beneath the fading light. The streets remained busy. The trains continued moving. Life carried on. And as I sat there, I realized something. Before coming to Thailand, I thought Pride Month would teach me about identity. Instead, it had taught me about community, about kindness, about belonging, about making room for people. The lesson felt larger than the event itself, larger than politics, larger than labels. It felt human. The version of Thailand I had imagined before arriving wasn't entirely wrong. It was simply incomplete. I had seen tradition. I had seen history. I had seen respect for customs. Those things were real, but so were warmth, acceptance, flexibility, community. Thailand was not one thing. It was many things at once. Beautifully complicated, beautifully human. The final rays of sunlight disappeared behind the skyline. The city lights slowly appeared, one by one. The celebration faded into evening, and as I stood to leave, I found myself thinking about something Pim had said. Thailand is easier to understand when you listen. At last, I was beginning to understand what she meant, because the lesson had never been hidden. It had been there all along, in conversations, in smiles, in ordinary moments. I simply needed to slow down enough to notice. And somewhere beyond the glowing city lights, another lesson was waiting. Not at a festival, not in a crowd, but around a family dinner table beside the river. Chapter 5. What Thailand taught me about acceptance. The morning after Bangkok Pride felt strangely peaceful. Not because the city was quieter. Bangkok is rarely quiet. Boats still cross the river. The BTS still carried thousands of passengers through the city. Street vendors still prepared breakfast before sunrise. Motorcycles still flowed through the streets. Life continued exactly as it had before, and yet something felt different. Perhaps it was me. Travel sometimes changes us so gradually that we don't notice it happening. Then one morning, we wake up and realize we are looking at the world differently. I spent the day walking without any particular destination. The weather was warm. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Every so often, a gentle breeze arrived from the river. The city felt familiar now. Not completely, not enough to call myself anything more than a visitor, but familiar enough that certain streets no longer felt new. The cafe where I had met Pim, the BTS station near my hotel, the riverside walkway where I often stopped to watch boats pass. Small pieces of Bangkok had quietly found a place in my memory. As afternoon faded toward evening, my phone vibrated. A message from Pim. Dinner tonight? My family is gathering by the river. You should join us. I smiled immediately. One of the greatest gifts travel can offer is an invitation, not to a tourist attraction, not to an event, but into someone's ordinary life. Those invitations reveal more about a country than any guidebook ever could. I replied almost instantly, I'd love to. Thank you. The restaurant sat beside a quieter stretch of the Chao Phraya. It wasn't fancy. There were no grand entrances, no expensive decorations, just wooden tables beneath strings of warm lights. The scent of grilled seafood drifted through the evening air. Lanterns hung from nearby trees. The river moved slowly beside the dining area. The atmosphere felt comfortable, the kind of place where people stayed longer than they planned. When I arrived, Pim waved from across the restaurant. Several family members already occupied a large table. Parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, children. The table seemed to grow larger every few minutes as more relatives arrived. Introductions happened quickly. Names were exchanged. Smiles were shared. And almost immediately, food began appearing. Then more food. Then even more food. I quickly learned something important about Thai family dinners. No matter how much food already exists on the table, there is always room for another dish. Every few minutes, something new arrived. Grilled fish, vegetables, rice, soups, fresh fruit. The meal seemed endless. Whenever I finished something, someone insisted I eat more. Refusing politely proved nearly impossible. Everyone found this extremely amusing, especially Pim's mother. She laughed every time I claimed I was full. Then she placed more food on my plate. The family laughed. I laughed. Eventually, I stopped resisting. As the evening continued, conversations flowed naturally around the table. Some people spoke English. Others spoke Thai. Translation happened whenever necessary. Yet even when I couldn't understand every word, I understood the feeling, warmth, connection, comfort, the kind of atmosphere that exists when people genuinely enjoy one another's company. At one point, Pim's younger brother arrived, the baker from Chiang Mai. The brother whose story had stayed with me since our conversation in the cafe. He greeted everyone warmly, hugged relatives, sat down, immediately began eating. Apparently, according to the rest of the family, this was entirely normal. The teasing began almost instantly. Everyone seemed delighted by his arrival. Watching the family interact, I noticed something interesting. No one spent time explaining who they were. No one seemed concerned about definitions, labels, categories. People simply existed as themselves. Family members, friends, individuals. The atmosphere felt uncomplicated. Not because life was uncomplicated, because acceptance often is. We sometimes imagine acceptance as a grand achievement, a complicated process, a difficult concept. Yet sitting beside the river that evening, it looked surprisingly simple. People making room for one another. People choosing to stay connected. People deciding that relationships matter. The sky gradually darkened above Bangkok. The river reflected hundreds of tiny lights. Boats drifted through the night, carrying passengers across the city. Music played softly from somewhere nearby. Everything felt peaceful. Eventually, I found myself sitting beside Pim's mother, the woman whose words had remained in my mind ever since I first heard her story. She spoke only a little English. I spoke almost no Thai, yet somehow conversation happened anyway. Smiles helped, gestures helped, patience helped. Pim occasionally translated when necessary. At one point, I asked a question, a simple question, perhaps the most important question of the evening. What is the most important thing in a family? Pim translated. Her mother listened carefully. Then she smiled. Her answer was immediate. No hesitation, no long speech, just a few words. Pim translated. Take care of each other. That was all. The simplicity of the answer made everyone smile, including me, especially me. Because somehow those 5 words seemed to summarize everything I have been learning throughout my journey. Take care of each other. The phrase felt remarkably familiar, not because I had heard it before, because I had seen it in the cafe, at Bangkok Pride, on the BTS, in conversations, in small moments between strangers. Throughout Thailand, people seem to express care through actions, offering food, offering help, offering space, offering patience, not always perfectly. No society is perfect, but often enough to notice, often enough to remember. The evening continued. Dessert arrived, fresh mango, sticky rice, sweet coconut desserts, tea, coffee, laughter, stories. Time seemed to slow beside the river. Nobody appeared eager to leave. Children grew sleepy. Grandparents smiled quietly. The city lights shimmered across the water, and I found myself thinking about the assumptions I had carried from England. The version of Thailand I believed I understood. The simple version, the incomplete version, a country of beaches, temples, smiles, tourism. Those things existed, certainly, but they were only part of the story. The real Thailand I encountered felt more complicated, more nuanced, more human, a place where tradition and change existed side by side, a place where family mattered deeply, a place where community remained important, a place where kindness often appeared in ordinary moments. The lesson had never really been about Pride Month. That surprised me. When I first noticed the rainbow flags, I assumed the story would be about visibility, representation, identity, and those things mattered. Of course they mattered, but Thailand has shown me something deeper, something quieter. The story was about people, the way people care for one another, the way communities make room for different lives, the way families choose love even when understanding takes time, the way belonging is built through countless small acts of kindness. The river continued flowing beside the restaurant, steady, patient, unhurried, much like the lessons I had learned here. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced, just a gradual unfolding of understanding. Eventually, the evening came to an end. Hugs were exchanged, goodbyes were said, promises were made to meet again. The family slowly disappeared into the warm Bangkok night. Before leaving, Pim walked with me toward the river. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. We simply watched the water, the lights, the boats, the city. Then she smiled. So? I laughed. So? Do you understand Thailand now? The question lingered between us. I thought carefully, then smiled. No, she laughed. I laughed too, because it was true. No traveler understands an entire country after one trip. Perhaps no one ever fully understands a country. They simply continue learning, continue listening, continue discovering. But, I said, I understand a little more than before. Pim nodded. That is enough. We stood quietly beside the river. The city shimmered around us. Warm, alive, beautiful. And for the first time since arriving, I felt no need to explain what I had learned. Some lessons resist summary. Some experiences resist simplification. Perhaps that was the final lesson Thailand offered me. People are more complicated than categories. Countries are more complicated than stereotypes, and understanding begins the moment we stop assuming we already know. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I opened my notebook one final time. The page remained blank for several moments. Then I wrote, "Before coming to Thailand, I thought acceptance needed to be loud. I thought it required speeches, announcements, debates, declarations. But Thailand taught me something quieter. Acceptance can look like a mother asking whether her child is hungry. It can look like friends sharing coffee. It can look like a family dinner beside a river. It can look like strangers making room for one another. And perhaps that quiet kindness is one of the most beautiful things a country can offer." I closed the notebook. Outside, the Chao Phraya reflected moonlight. The city slowly drifted towards sleep. A boat moved silently through the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a train crossed Bangkok one last time before midnight. And as I listened to the gentle sounds of the city, I realized something. Thailand had not simply changed my opinion. It had changed the way I looked at people. And perhaps that is the most valuable journey of all. Good night. Thailand still holds countless stories waiting to be discovered. If you would like to continue this journey together, I hope to see you again in the next story from Thailand through eyes. And if there is somewhere in Thailand you wish to visit through story, leave your suggestion below. Perhaps our next journey will begin there.